The title of Mark's talk is Humble Beginnings. Mark.
Thanks. Interesting, very interesting. So, it's so weird because I have a lot of mentors, people who are very famous that you've probably heard of. There's one guy, his name is Gil Moore, and he's the drummer of Triumph, and he owns a recording studio called Metalworks. And it's the largest recording studio in Canada. It also houses a lot of students. And I had the pleasure of meeting him only because I called about 10 times in about a month, and then I wrote a letter to him saying in the letter that you've accomplished everything in your career that I've ever wanted to accomplish, and I want to meet you and ask you some questions. And the only reason why he would ever open it is because on it I put urgent, please read. And and I hand-delivered it. I walked over there, and so I got a call from his secretary saying, hey, you can come for one time and one time only to meet with Gil, and he will answer any of your questions. It was really inspiring for me, listening to this man who's a rock star, who owns this studio, who's just everything. And for me, I took a lot out of it. A couple of things. One of them, he said, your career is like, you want it, and Brian Crew put it elegantly in his little drawing there, where you want it to go from here to here, and it's always going up, but that's not the case. It's like a crack in a foundation. And that's what Gil Moore said. Your career is like a crack in a foundation. It's going to go up, it's going to go sideways, it's going to go down, it's going to go left, it's going to go right. You have no idea. The other thing that he said to me was, hey, what do you do for a living? And I said, I own a recording studio. And he says, oh, my condolences to you. It's like, and that coming from this guy. And then just the other day, I met Gil probably about a decade ago. So just the other day, I'm talking now 2 weeks ago, I go for a colonoscopy. And if you don't know what a colonoscopy is, good on you. But nowadays they put you out. They give you an anesthetic, and you don't even know that you had a colonoscopy. And the doctor, he's asking me questions beforehand. So he says, okay, what's your name? How old are you? Do you smoke? And what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I'm a music producer. And he says to me, oh, that's a hard go. Oh, you must have it rough. And then I was out. And then I woke up, and it's like, that guy, what the hell? So So I wanted to talk to you today about humble beginnings, because I feel that beginnings are the most important thing in your career, because you have to see the finish line before you even get it started. And if you can't see the finish line, there's no point in wasting your time, your energy, your money. It's very important. So I'm going to start when I was in the womb, my mom's womb. So my parents are sitting right there. That's my mom and dad over there. Give them a round of applause for just being here. That's great. So my mom told me that she was on a boat cruise, and there was a band playing, and every time the drums started, she would have to sit down because I was pounding to the beat in her stomach, and she would sit down on the cruise, and then as soon as the band was done, she's like, okay, he stopped, I can go, and then they would start again. Whoa, you got to sit down. So she named me Mark William Pezzelato. Mark after Mark Twain, and William after William Shakespeare, which I find very interesting because I had no intention of writing any books. Yet there's 3 sitting right over there, which is so bizarre. And I'll get into that because I don't know what happens there. Have you ever had something happen to you where it just flows so naturally, and it's as if somebody else is doing it or something else is doing it? That's those books. That's what happens. And it happens because you get into a creative space. And you get into a creative space when you're following your heart. You're following your passion. So that was me in the womb. When I was 5, now there's always a time where a kid comes online. And what I mean by a kid coming online, it's like that first thing that they remember, that boom, oh, geez, I'm alive. They just remember. And for me, it was, I was sitting cross-legged. We used to live in Ingersoll, Ontario. And I was sitting watching the TV. I don't remember what was on, but I remember turning to my left and looking up, and then having this overwhelming feeling that I was going to die. One day I'm going to die, and I'm only 5, and it scared me. Death scared me to no end. I started panicking. I was breathing really heavily. I started crying. I ran upstairs and started crying for my mom. Do you remember this, Mom? Yeah. And she didn't know why I was crying. I had no reason to be crying. And so once I calmed down enough, I said, Mom, I'm going to die. And she goes, Mark, I'm going to die before you. And that made me cry even more. I was just, oh my goodness. So that's 5 years old. 5 years old. I went for another 10 to 15 years fearing death to no end. I would, especially when I was alone. So if I was in bed, usually, so I'm going to bed and I'm laying there, and all of a sudden I think one day I'm going to die. And I would start, my heart would beat faster, my breath would go faster, and I would just freak out. It was the thought that what happens? Is there nothing? Is there something? And it was just so overwhelming that I would have to get up, start walking around, and start thinking about something else. Always averting it, thinking about something else until eventually it would go away. I even had thoughts like, okay, somewhere else in the world, somebody else is awake, so it's okay. They're over there. It's daytime over there in Las Vegas. Las Vegas never sleeps. They're going. So I would think about that and then eventually calm down. But I also thought maybe there's something wrong with me. If I have a fear of death, maybe there's something wrong with me because everybody dies. That is what we all have in common. We're not here forever. Everybody dies. So, this is now 15 years. What I started doing was researching death. I started listening to people who talk about death, authors who write about death. I started listening to people who know something. And that's an important thing. Who do you listen to? Who do you listen to? You listen to the people who have attained the things that you desire to attain. Gil Moore, drummer of Triumph, has attained everything in his career that I've ever desired to attain, so I'm listening to that man. Somebody who has experience spiritually, meditators, authors, I'm listening to them. They seem like they know what they are talking about. So that's going on while I'm going to high school, while I'm going to college. When I was in high school, I was very fortunate because my sister Eileen, she worked for Standard Broadcasting, and she worked for CFRB in Toronto as a producer. So when I came into grade 11, she asked me if I wanted to do co-op at her facility, and I thought, wow, that's amazing, radio. And I didn't know anything about radio. And she said, well, what department do you want to be in? Department? They have departments? And so I had to decide. So I thought, okay. And I always thought that maybe I wanted to be either an architect or an engineer or something of that nature because my dad was in construction. So he was always getting me some construction jobs. So I thought maybe I want to get into construction. So I started getting into the maths and all these wonderful topics that are so boring. And, and I did co-op at this radio station. And I got into the engineering department of all places. So if you've ever soldered before, that was my first experience soldering headphones and working with broken equipment. And I had never seen any of this equipment before. So picture yourself seeing a piece of equipment, electrical equipment, and not even knowing what the thing does when it works, and having to fix it. but you don't even know what it does. So you're useless. You're just useless at this job. So I just kind of like cleaned up and just like put on a smile and was like, I could hang a picture because my dad's a carpenter, so they got me to hang pictures sometimes. And I really screwed up, like really large. So this was at the time where Mel Lastman was the mayor of Toronto, so they had all the Mel Lastman moose everywhere in the city. And on 2 St. Clair Avenue West, where CFRB, Standard Broadcasting, was, there was a moose, and it was in an on-air booth. And the on-air booth had this light on top that was lit 24/7, and it was powered by a car battery. So there was another student working there because I started before him, and because I got the foot in the door for the Cardinal Carter Catholic High School to have a co-op student there, this guy was there too. But he knew what he was doing. He was in charge of bringing the battery back and forth, charging it, make sure it was okay. So one day, he said he had to leave early, so it was my turn to bring the battery down. So battery's pretty heavy, it's a car battery. I'm gonna put it on a dolly and walk the battery all the way on the 2nd floor, downstairs, and through the main lobby. Brand new main lobby. Beautiful lobby with all this black granite, beautiful marble tiling. A carpenter's dream. And that battery that I was pushing in the dolly as it was tipped over was dripping battery acid everywhere. So when I hooked up the battery, I was like, wow, this is kind of weird. It's a little bit wet. And then I'm walking back and I'm looking on the floor, and there's all the black marble in spots is turning white. And it's turning white, and then I get into the elevator, and the carpet in the elevator is smoking. And then I get up to the 2nd floor, and I look, and there's little smoke coming from the carpet leading all the way to the engineering department. Oh my God. So I talked to the head engineer, Dave Simon, and so Dave they got this cleaning crew. They cleaned it all up. But Dave was in the other room, and the door was closed. And I just hear him go, "That stupid kid, I'm gonna kill him! And then he opens the door, and he goes, "Go home." And I said, "Dave, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for whatever damage." He goes, "I don't pay you enough to cover the damage. Go home." Yeah. There was another incident, if you can believe. They have a board. Okay, so like if you've ever been to a radio station, they have these beautiful big consoles, and each one of them has this individual slot. And these slots, these modules can get pulled out of the board, and you can go fix a component and put it back in. And it's brilliant for on-air radio because you have to be running 24/7, so if there's a problem with the board, you can just fix a little piece of the board. Well, there had been this module that had been out of the board for 2 days. And I said to one of the engineering guys, I said, "Hey, do you mind if I put it in? You guys are so busy, I can just go there and put it in for you. It's not a big deal." So he said, "Yes, okay, go put it in." So I did. I went with my buddy there, who the battery acid guy, and he said, "I'm not doing it, you do it." I'm like, "Okay." So I put it in, like I'm ready, and they're on a commercial break. And now, this is primetime radio. This is 1 p.m. My sister is the producer of this show. This is the Mott's. So she's in the room. There is the technical producer in the room who's controlling the board, so he's standing back. And I'm about to put the thing in. And it's not quite... Whole station goes down. Am I gonna die right now? And then what was the longest, like 10 seconds of my life, and then just power comes back on, and lights are flashing like it's Christmas, and I'm like, oh my God. What happened was when you put in a module, there's teeth. So the teeth are like this on the bottom, and you have to fit the teeth in perfectly. But to fit it in, you gotta go on the right angle of the board. And I went straight down, and it went boom, and it short-circuited everything. So I left, and then I hear on the intercom, "Would all engineers please come to master control? We have a major problem." Module after module after module gets pulled out of that board and sat in the engineering department. They had to literally take the show that they were doing and go into control room number 2 and swap out the entire board. And they had to solder all the pieces back in, all the blown transistors and everything. And they didn't fire me. They did not fire me because I had asked for permission first. So according to them, it was their fault because they knew my level of expertise. What can you do? You don't leave it to this guy. But what I did have was a certain likability factor. I was able to get into the other department, and the other department was the role of that guy who was standing there, the technical producer who pushes all the buttons and runs the on-air, the live. So he's in charge of making sure the broadcasters are on time and making sure everything's running smoothly, playing the commercial breaks, playing everything. And I was very good at that job. And I got into that job right at the same time that they were going to let me go. So it was perfect. And I excelled at that because I had a natural passion for it and I understood it. But I didn't have a passion for engineering. I didn't understand it, and you can see the results. It's disastrous. So do what you love. Do what you love. And so I'm in high school. We're talking grade 11, grade 12 that this all went down. So I'm gaining a lot of experience, and then I go to apply to colleges and universities. And I wanted to get into film and television. I thought, hey, that would be really great. And I was getting really good grades. I was getting A's and B's, So I applied to all these places. Do you know how many places accepted me? 0. I got accepted by nobody. I've seen more rejection letters. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen a letter of acceptance unless somebody showed me it was theirs. And that's to this day. I'm talking about grants from towns of Richmond Hill. I'm talking about everything. I'm still getting rejection letters. It just happens. And the more rejection you get, it builds you stronger, right? Yes. So I got rejected everywhere. So now here I was thinking I would go into this schooling, be in film and television. But you don't know how your career is going to go. That's part of being an entrepreneur. You have no idea. But I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a high school student. And all I know is I still need some more schooling and I need my hand held because I suck. So I took a few months off and then went to York University's really nice. They sent me a letter after the rejection letter saying, hey, come to our school under the Faculty of Arts. Pay us $3,500. You can stay for a semester and learn a couple of things. So I said, okay, I'll do that. They went on strike. So, what a waste. I just dropped out of the courses and I wasn't digging it anyways. I thought they were interesting courses, but it doesn't even matter. What ended up happening after that was really something significant because I was I was thinking, okay, you know what? I kind of want to be on the air. I want to talk on the radio. I think that would be really, really spectacular. So I ended up doing some research. I talked to my boss at CFRB because I was in the production department. He said, you can't be on the radio. You can't be on Toronto radio. You got to go to broadcasting school. I go, really? Okay. So I applied. I applied to Loyalist College in Belleville. I saw that they had a rock station. First, I found their rock station, 92.3 FM CJLX. And I was like, wow, that sounds cool. So I emailed the head of the department, and I said, I have experience at CFRB. I didn't tell him I trailed battery acid everywhere, and I didn't tell him that I blew up a console. But I told him that I worked there, and that I want to come to their school. And I wrote them a letter, and they accepted me. They even omitted my entire first semester of a 2-year course because I had radio experience. So I didn't have to do the first semester, and I got in. The only place that ever accepted me said, sure, just come for half the time. Yeah. You know what happened? I graduated, and I found that it was actually the easiest schooling I had ever done. I graduated at the top of my class with perfect grades, and I received the top announcer award, and I was on the dean's list. And it felt so easy and so right and so perfect. And it was all because it was something that I was so passionate about. It just all fell into line. So, as I'm doing this, I still have a fear of death. Imagine that. But it all kind of comes together because the spiritual pushes you in your professional. They work hand in hand, and if they're not working hand in hand, it's not working for you. It's working against you. What ended up happening was I was still doing research. I was always reading those books. When I'm in my car, I'm listening to people talk in books and things like this. And I ended up finding Vipassana meditation. But I'm going to go back for a second. Because before I even started meditating, as a graduating present, my dad took me to Italy. And Pezzelato, Italian paisan. Am I almost done? Oh my goodness.
You could talk forever.
Yeah.
It's so entertaining.
How much time do I really have?
You have maybe
2 more minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, 2 minutes. Here we go. So he took me to see my family in Italy, and we went to all our relatives, and he told me his life story, and I ended up writing his life story, and it's over there. It was just magnificent to see all the places that he grew up. But the one thing that happened that changed things for me was when I saw what was going on over there, the most successful of my cousins and aunts and uncles, they owned a birdcage company, an international birdcage company. And I thought, wow, they are the most successful, and they own their own business. Everybody else was just run down, tired, and didn't have 2 pennies to kind of cling together. So I was like, okay, I want to own my own business. So I told my dad, and he was very excited, and I ended up starting a recording studio in my parents' basement, which is still there, only it takes about half the house now. And it's really something, and you need the support, and my parents are so supportive, and I couldn't ask for anything more, because you have to have something when you're learning and growing. I started a business when I was 22, green as anything, and I learned so much. And I figured by the time I'm 32, I'm going to have run my own business for 10 years, and it's going to be something amazing if I can even make it to that milestone. And I did, and I passed it. And where the spiritual comes in is that I started meditating. And I went and took a 10-day Vipassana course. And since then, I've been to so many meditation retreats. I meditate 2 hours of every day. I never start something without seeing the end. I've written 3 books there. I've worked with hundreds of artists. I've worked with thousands of songs, all these things, because I can always see it first. And I'm very focused and driven, and I know what I'm going to do in a day before I do that day. And it's so important. The beginning is always important, because if you can't see the end, or you don't know what it's really going to take, and you don't know if you have the energy, then don't do it until you see it. Thank you.